Hey there, welcome to episode 4 of Grind and Flow, the Creativity Podcast. I'm Chuck Moore, and am pleased to present today's guest, songwriter-producer Bonnie Baker. Over several decades, Bonnie has amassed an impressive catalog of songs for artists like Tennille Arts, Rascal Flatts, Reba McEntire, Hunter Hayes, Shelley Wright, and so many others. Her songs have racked up 150 million streams on Spotify. I first encountered Bonnie when attending a remote songwriters workshop she led way back during those freewheeling days of the pandemic, and eventually we connected in real life and have enjoyed a number of sprawling conversations about parenting, politics, shared backgrounds, the life of a working creative, and so on. A little taste of which I'm happy to share with you here in a moment. Also, Bonnie talks about key influences and collaborators in her career, including songwriter Liz Rose, who was instrumental in Taylor Swift's phenomenal rise. Bonnie is a wonderful influence in her own right, continuing to lead workshops and holds the distinction of being a Country Music Hall of Fame songwriting mentor. Bonnie definitely has a teacher's heart and is wonderfully generous with the oodles of knowledge she holds about her craft and ever-shifting industry. A couple of high points from me in this episode. One, Bonnie recounts her bold path from a hardscrabble Texas upbringing to a risky new life in Nashville. And perhaps related, takeaway number 2, Bonnie's sage reminder to surround yourself with people who are strong in areas you're not. So here we go. Let's get to know songwriter, producer, mentor, Bonnie Baker. So pretend I'm an 8-year-old and tell me what you do.
I wake up in the morning and try to think of something that feels like what I want to say. And I always think lyrically first. And then what does that lyric feel like? And then I try to put sound to it, whether it's super simple guitar vocal, piano vocal, or is it more of a, is there more of a track involved? Is it a all sing, all skate? Is it an intimate thought? I always center around messaging. Like, who am I speaking to? And how do I need to speak to them? Imploring, passionate, or questioning, or trying to understand where they're coming from. You know, my audience is always kind of in the back of my mind.
Would it be fair to say you were accomplished in your field? And if so, how?
That's a very big question. I feel like I have accomplished some things. Is it as much as I wanted to accomplish? I don't know yet. But in some ways, I've accomplished way more than I ever dreamed I would. So that is a dichotomy that I kind of live with every day. Meaning, I grew up very small town, poor, like parents didn't really think of college at all. And I was determined to get out of that small town, go to college, read books, see the world. So in some ways, I don't know that I ever thought I would do anything. But in other ways, I think there are things I've yet to accomplish. I have had some success, and I'll be brutally honest, just supporting myself has been the biggest accomplishment. Just being creative and learning how to feed myself and my kid and my family, that's been the biggest accomplishment.
What's the best part of your job?
The people, the musicians, the studio engineers, the owners, the other songwriters, the artists, the 18-year-old guys that haven't showered in 3 days, the incredible moms that walk in and they've been up all night with their kids, but they come in and just bring some lyric fire that just kills me. Every sort of type of person I've been in the room with, and I'm just constantly floored by the human creativity that I get to be with and sit with. So I think that's the best part. Yeah.
What's the hardest part of what you do, and how do you push through?
The hardest part of what I do is my own expectations of how things should go. In the creative world, we are starting with 0, going to infinity. And if it doesn't go fast enough, I get worried. If it goes too fast, I get scared. If it drops out, I feel like it's my fault. Like, no matter what happens, I have a lot of, you'll pick up on your conversation with me. I have tons of self-doubt, just tons of like, what did I do wrong? So that is the hardest part, pushing through. I just tell myself to start a new day every day. I literally just wake up. I usually wake up 2 to 3 hours before I have to be anywhere, because I need that long, slow walk into a day, have my coffee, I have quiet time. I usually read some and almost putting my armor on to walk into the day. So I try to let every day be a completed sentence and then just move from there. I love the poet's heart because they try to see the simple and make it heavenly. They make it something otherworldly. And I think that is the human experience, is we're walking on this earth with grass and rocks and dirt and water and air. And that seems very simple, and yet there's just this multi-layer of complexity. And that's where I think a poet lives. They want to explain in human terms what is unexplainable.
Who were some key mentors in your journey? And are there pearls of wisdom from them that you'd like to share?
So many, it's hard to always parse this out. Liz Rose, I mean, she has been someone I've respected for 25 years. So I have a lot of what I call the day-to-day heroes that have kind of shown me how to conduct yourself in a professional creating of music world, that you can't just be blindly pinging about. You've got to be focused and steady and stable and creative and strong and passionate. So they've taught me everything from how to be a parent to how to show up to your sessions on time, how to take care of your mind and your body. So it's not just about writing. I think the mentors I've had taught me just about life, about how to be a human and how to be imperfect but kind and generous. What I learned from Liz Rose, what I learned from Connie Harrington, when you believe in something, believe in it whether everyone believes in it or not. Taylor Swift was a young kid. Liz Rose believed in her before anyone else did. Connie Harrington would believe in songs before anyone else did. They were not followers. They were leaders, thought leaders. And I learned from that to have my own opinion and not to look to other people to tell me they're right or wrong. It's easy to get pulled by what other people think. A song doesn't do well on radio, then you think it's a failure. No, it's not. It just happened to not do well that time, right? Songs that people didn't want us to demo, Connie would just be very confident. We're going to demo. If we have to pay for it ourselves, it doesn't matter. We believe in it. We're going to do it. And so much of my success came from those moments of just doing what someone else didn't think was the right move to make. But because I thought it was the right move, I learned that from those two, for sure.
So in the moment, are there any checks and balances or filters? Because it is so subjective at the end of the day.
If I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking about a song, if I go to sleep at night thinking about a song, if that happens long enough, then I know that something in the universe is not letting me forget. So that's a big marker, to go back and think about that, to pull that song out. I will say that I tend to be very emotional, and I try to put emotions over on the shelf and look at something objectively. Like, am I just in love with this because emotionally there's something that I attach to? But here's the way I believe. If I'm attached to this emotionally, what would keep someone else from being attached to it emotionally as well? But I also run a business, so I try to stay with one foot in reality, one foot in the magical, because you cannot lean too far one side or the other. You've got to keep that balance of like believing that magic is ready to happen, but knowing you got to pay your bills that month.
So was that a natural superpower to have a good sense of when to run and when to fight?
When to fight, when to... No, I don't think I had a great instinct early on, but I did listen to my gut instinct. And sometimes it was misguided, but I found that 99% of the time there was something there that I needed to push through and get to. I was thinking about this today. At like 14, there was a job in the town over from where I grew up that was going to be a bit of a stretch for me, but I felt like that was a way for me to understand the world, and literally made myself do it because my gut instinct told me this would be good for me. So following that and having it pay off then leads you to following your instinct more. But we really know what's best for ourselves. Not every situation turns out to be ideal immediately. Sometimes there's long-term effects, from doing something that's overwhelming or scary or just a little on the edge. So it was an early exercise I started. It's the reason I went to college. I was like, I want to go to college. I want to have a degree. Scary, no money, you're poor, okay? All of those things. But I just felt like that was the right thing to do. So it started early for me of like, I want to say survival. I know that sounds dramatic, but it was, I will not last if I have to stay in this system forever and ever. I won't make it to 30. Wow. It just felt like I was caught in a system that wanted me to be controlled and quiet and stay in my lane and don't be anything other than what you are now, which is a girl in a very poor town, and you get married and you have kids and you settle down.
Right.
So it was a cocoon type situation. I had to struggle against the systems around me to get out from that. So I find, my 10,000 hours in my skill set started actually with 10,000 hours of just life skill, of just learning how to break out of systems. They're not easy when you're 15, 18, 20, to go against the norm, to go against what everyone else is doing.
Tell me a little bit about your background that you were resisting and trying to get away from.
So I grew up in a small town. My father was the Baptist minister in our small town. My high school and middle school and elementary were all in one building, 6 students in each class. I'm talking tiny, very poor, very, education was not important. There was such a structure of class system. My parents didn't have a lot of money, but because my dad was the preacher, everyone knew him, and there was just this very, I want to say, bizarre kind of structure. And it's not that I don't have faith, or that God or universe or whatever you talk about is not important to me, but there was just this very odd sense of right and wrong that I can't really explain. If you were white and Christian, you were right. If you were brown and Muslim, you were wrong. If you were black and went to a different Baptist church, you were not right. You were wrong. And I did not understand that. I had great friends at school that could not come to church with me because they were black. So that was just a structure that I didn't feel comfortable with. And I knew that I wanted to learn more and understand why it was that way. I was a big listener to speeches and things like that early days. I would listen to speeches by like Margaret Thatcher. I mean, I was just an odd kid anyway.
Your appreciation of the language.
I was
your lyric writing.
I was incredibly intrigued by the use of language to move countries and people to do what they do. That's a pretty powerful tool. So yeah, that was an early age. I had headphones on all the time. I wasn't allowed to listen to any music outside of church music. I couldn't listen to the radio. I couldn't own music outside of that. So I
found something even more subversive, sounds
like. So that's when I learned how to be on headphones so no one could hear what I was listening to. And I would sneak music in, and, you know, the Eagles or Linda Ronstadt, you know, the Devil's music.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, and I think not being able to hear it all the time made me love it even more, because like you said, the subversive is, it makes it just more intriguing. But yeah, there was kind of a veil put over most of us in this cult, and those of us that pulled the veil back and tried to see life with a clear vision, we were not applauded for that.
Wow, that's powerful. But I'm also, on a side note, I'm fascinated by a world where the Eagles were considered subversive. That's
right.
It's pretty intense.
That's intense.
Eagles, man, really? I always think of The Big Lebowski. But
yeah, it's a great movie. I saw my first movie when I was 18 years old.
In 1992, Bonnie crammed her whole kit and caboodle in a Chevy Cavalier and set off for Nashville and her first apartment. By the end of the decade, she'd written her first hit, a song called Ordinary Life by Chad Brock. Tracks followed for Reba McEntire, Rascal Flatts, and others, a number of which were compositions on million-selling albums. As you could imagine, over decades as a working songwriter, Bonnie has seen the predictably unpredictable ebb and flow of a career in entertainment. But throughout her journey, Bonnie has developed some practices and outlooks I think are absolutely universal. Check it out.
And this is from years of being here, writing, working. I started to understand what is meant by surrounding yourself with quality people. And what I mean by that is you have to get the movie Moneyball and you have to study it, because it is just a classic example of not the most talented people being put into the right situations with the right timing for success. I am not the most talented piano player, writer, singer, any of that. Producer, none of it. Am I the best at? But the more I realized, if I bring in people that are good at what I'm not good at, instead of feeling competition with that, feeling a sense of drive from that. Like iron sharpens iron. You get better by being around better people. If I walk into a room and I'm the best writer in the room, I'm not in a good room for me. I need to put myself in situations where I feel a little awkward, a little vulnerable, a little out of sorts, because the people I am with are so good. They make me want to be better. So it was a scary thing at first. And when I first started, every room I walked into was the better room. You know, every single room was just amazing. And you know, the Brandy Clarks, the Connie Harringtons, Liz Rose, all of the people that I worked with, Brett Beavers, Troy Johnson, all of the people I worked with early on were all way ahead of me. And so as I learned from them, then my tendency was, okay, I want to be comfortable now. When I go into some rooms where I can be the hit songwriter. I didn't find that I got as much out of it because I stopped growing. So I went back to the philosophy of like, I need to surround myself with people that do well what I don't do well. But the first part of that is to identify what I did well. And I was always the concept person. I was always the point of view. Like, how do we tell this story differently than has been told before? How do we make that title pop off the page and feel really interesting? How do you craft a hook? All of those things. So I knew what I was good at, but I knew what I was not good at. And so my success can totally be explained by saying I really worked hard to be around people that were good at the things I wasn't good at, because it's like a puzzle. All the pieces have to fit together. If you open a box and it's a puzzle and all the pieces are shaped exactly the same, you don't have a puzzle. You have redundancy. So if you don't have those edges and those shapes that fit together, you're not going to come out with a picture. So I just, and sometimes I'm surprised by what happens when you get in a room with somebody that is a great jazz musician or singer. I'm not a jazz person, but they're good, and it makes you want to like study the language and how do I put those vowels and consonants together in something that feels classic and enduring, or I've got a couple of guys that are, straight up rock and roll guys, right? Just play guitar loud, all the things. How do I relate to them? Well, I study, I listen to what they're doing, and then I try to fit the language into that product. I had a couple of young, like 20-year-olds, 19, 20-year-olds in LA one time. They were these young pop producers. And we got put together for some reason or another. And I remember thinking, oh, this could go very wrong because we were such different writers. But then the idea back in my head was, they do something you don't do. So lean into it, allow them to be the genius that they are so that I can hear that and try to push something forward. And, every time I come out with a song in that situation, it's a better song than I would have written. So that's what I mean about surrounding yourself with people that are good at what you're not good at, know what you're not good at, and don't have an ego. No one can walk into a creative room with an ego and come out with anything worth a demo, So ego is checked at the door, know what is what, know what the cards are that you hold, and then know what the cards are the other person holds, and how do you make a winning combination out of that. And makes me a bit of a chameleon. Like, some writers are just, they are what they are. But like, I just worked on a project that was a kind of a soccer anthem for the New Zealand women's soccer team, hired out of the blue to do something. So I open up Spotify and I study the top 10 hits in New Zealand. What do they have in common? What do they sound like? What do they feel like? Because you want to communicate in a language, and I don't mean English or non, I just meant the musical language of who you're trying to talk to, And then I called on a friend of mine who, incredible melody person, incredible interpreter, and played through some ideas with her, and she nailed it. And she did what I couldn't do, and I did what she couldn't do. And we built the house together, and it turned out really fun and cool, and I'm just so proud of it.
Humble brag time for Bonnie coming up. I'm always curious what successful creators view as landmark moments in their careers. For Bonnie, one example involved her mom encountering her music at a Walmart, and the other, a Hunter Hayes Grammy performance of a song where Bonnie's instincts were initially dismissed by others, but eventually proven right. And this story illustrates, I think, one of my favorite quotes from legendary screenwriter William Goldman, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's basically, nobody knows nothing.
Met a young artist early on, Hunter Hayes, when he was young, worked on the first record with him, got to the second record, and we started writing, and we worked all day trying to get that up-tempo, fun pop hit for radio, right? We worked and worked and worked, and it was just going nowhere. And then around 3:00 in the afternoon, I finally asked, what's going on? Something doesn't feel right. I feel like we're phoning it in. Because sometimes after success, you're like, I don't know how to follow this up, right? Second album mentality. Well, we just start talking and having a heart-to-heart, and then we wrote a song called Invisible. And we literally wrote the rest of the evening. He started the demo around 8. I went to get us a little dinner. I think we wrapped the demo at midnight, 1:00. Long day. I didn't know, is it good or am I just emotional because I'm exhausted? I didn't know. So fast forward, he starts to make the next record, and the label loved the song, but they wanted him to cut it with a name producer and that kind of thing. They still were not quite sure about him playing all the parts and the things that he does. So they spent an ungodly amount of money on this song because he was going to debut it on the Grammys. And so they spent a lot of money. They had a full orchestra. One of the best mixers in the world was mixing it. And so we're all excited. It's going to be on the Grammys. And literally 2 days before the Grammys, the label came back and said, we love your demo, and we just feel like that's the version that should go out. And once again, that instinct that you have in the moment is so powerful. And that was a moment that I was like, I'm not right all the time, but I'm not wrong all the time. Because we felt like we had something special. And we did. We had something special. Debuts it, and then we were nominated for a Grammy the next year. So that's been, Invisible has been a huge part of my career. My career was a little bit in a trough at the time, and then so Invisible kind of helped bring that back around. I still get letters from people all over the world like, this song has helped me and that kind of thing. So that has been a positive experience of just trusting my instinct. The second moment of my life wasn't hearing my song on the radio, but the first cut that I got was the biggest single I've ever had. I'd literally been writing for 8 months. A song called Ordinary Life got cut. It was a single, did well. We had a 1, 2, 3 party because it was 1 and 2 and 3 on 3 different charts. And right after that, you would hear it on the radio. But I get a call from my mom, and she had been in Walmart and heard the song on the, on the overhead. And she says to the girl who's checking her out, she's like, I think my daughter wrote this song. And the lady said to her, that's a really big deal. So my mom calls me to go, is that a really big deal? The lady at Walmart said it was, And it was just a moment of like, I don't know if it's a big deal, Mom, but that's cool that you got to hear it on, on how stores play music overhead. So that was a cool moment for my mom and I to kind of share of like, I don't know that my parents really understand still to this day. Do they understand what I do for a living? I don't know. But that was a moment that I think she found something that was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So those are two of my biggies, I think.
Hey, time to let Bonnie wrap it up here in a second. But real quick, thank you so much for listening, and we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to comment or DM on Instagram at Grind and Flow Official, spell out and also be sure to follow us on YouTube and Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music podcast apps. So, hope you got something useful out of this episode and that you'll join us next time. See ya. What gets you through the downtimes and keeps you pushing through?
Back to that 14-year-old kid, just knowing if I would push myself through the uncomfortableness, I will land somewhere. So that every downturn that I get, I just feel like the opposite is coming. You're going to lose 100% of the shots you don't take. This feels like a very mushy statement, but if I am not getting no enough, that means I'm not pushing myself enough. That means I am taking the easy basket instead of taking the 3-point shot on the perimeter.